Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. Today, we are here to talk about the best board games of all time, 30 through 21, with Kellen, Mark, and Neilan.
Hello.
Hey.
And as you have seen for the last few weeks, we have a very special guest in the peanut gallery today. And the way we do this is we got pre-recorded bits from them, so they can't talk back. They can say their and then we can say our to them, but they don't get to say anything back, so we sound good. And today we are bringing back the Black Tank, the fantastic Michael Walker from the fantastic podcast So Very Wrong About Games. Golden Geek winner?
Golden Geek winners.
Golden Geek winner.
Golden Geek winners. They beat us last year, which was fantastic. We are so excited to have his commentary back injected into the podcast and look to partner up with them many more times in the future. So you'll hear his lovely voice in the peanut gallery. There is no preamble. There is no games that we have been playing. We're in the holiday spirit. We're going to talk about 30 amazing board games. And we're going to do something a little different this time. The order. The order is going to be me first. Normally, we go other tanks first, and then the host goes last. But not when I'm in charge. We're going to go Kellen, Mark, and Neilan. KMN. KMN for this one, boys. Are we ready?
Ready.
My 30th favorite board game of all time is one of my favorites and one of Neilan's favorites. This comes to us from the only true and living Dr. Rainer Knizia, and this is one of his most fun, but perhaps weirder games that other people have a challenge with, and that is Taj Mahal. This had a beautiful new edition just a few years back where you are combining area control, you are combining hand management into a game that has you playing poker and pulling out at the exact moment you need to get the exact thing that you need to and not losing. But you can lose, and you can lose pretty hard in a game of Taj Mahal. You are putting out cards and you're currently winning on elephants. And all you want to do is win elephants, but all Neilan wants to do is win elephants. And it unfortunately devolves into a very, very tough game where one of you will lose and one of you will win. What I love so very much about Taj Mahal is the long-term plans that you must make versus the short-term poker game that you are playing where you just eke out with just a little bit more than you thought you were going to get or a little extra bonus or benefit. Taj Mahal is a weird hybrid game that I think everyone should try once, but if you are not a fan of meaner auctions, you probably should stay away because your best laid plans are best laid in your head, not on the board, because you got by Taj Mahal by the only true and living Dr. Rainer Knizia.
We go from one of Knizia's great auction games that I'm not such a big fan of to one of his great auction games that I am a big fan of.
And
another one that has recently got a new edition. This is Modern Art.
Oh, I was wrong. I thought it was Raw, which is why I said really loudly.
This is part of the Knizia auction trilogy, along with the aforementioned Raw and Medici. Modern Art is a game that I think is probably the closest thing to being like an undiluted pure auction game. Modern Art is all about auctions. In fact, the only mechanisms in the game are just 5 different types of auctions. What you're doing is you are auctioning off these cards representing paintings from 5 different artists. Every round you want to have the most pieces of art of the artist who has sold the most pieces overall. That artist will score you the most points. The artist in second place will score the second most, and the artist in third will score third. But the twist is that in subsequent rounds, if an artist doesn't place in the top 3, in that round, their art is worth nothing. But then later on, if they have a resurgence, let's say an artist was very hot early on, art sold for a lot early in the game, and then in the final round they make a resurgence and they're back in first place in the art world, the value that they achieved in earlier rounds is added to that final round score. So if an artist was hot early and comes back and gets hot later on, you get sort of the benefit of their early success. And it's a way to sort of wedge in the theme in a game that people might argue is maybe a pasted on theme. That's sort of something that Knizia, I think, unjustly gets tarred with as pasting themes onto his games. But I think it really, really works with modern art. I love the idea of an artist going out of style and his art being worth nothing. And then all of a sudden later on coming back into style and gaining all that, previous acclaim. And if you like auctions, modern art is for you. It's, again, just a game with 5 different types of auctions. So you've got the blind bidding, you've got a once around, you've got a whole bunch of different kinds of auctions. It is, for me, the purest of the pure auction games, and one that I love a great deal. Modern art, my 30th favorite game of all time, down 8 from last year.
I love modern art as well. It was on my list last year, in fact. It just slipped off this year. But yeah, in this block of 3, we've had 2 Knizia games already, and by some massive coincidence, the third game is a game that Knizia once told me he wished he had designed. This is Deception, Murder in Hong Kong.
Wow.
This is a social deduction party game. It is one of my favorite social deduction games. I think it's very, very approachable. The premise of the game is that one person at the table is a murderer. They will pick a piece of evidence. They will pick a murder weapon, and then the detectives at the table have to try figure out who the murderer is by following the lead of the forensic scientist. They know who the murderer is, but can only give very subtle clues pointing to those 2 items. But everyone also has their own items, so there's a whole amount of misdirection going on where the murderer is trying to trick detectives into thinking that other players' items more closely fit the clues while trying to protect themselves. One of my favorite ways to play this is with the addition of an accomplice who's also trying to help the murderer out. And the thing that I love about this is that in all of those roles, there's not one of them that I don't love playing. I love being the forensic scientist. I love being the generic detective, being the accomplice and the murderer. There are often in these types of social deduction games,
like in your normal life?
Yeah, exactly. Like in my normal everyday serial killer life.
Generic.
Oh, no, I thought you meant my creepy murderer habits, but okay, I'll accept being ultra generic. But yeah, a lot of times what happens in social deduction games, there are some roles that are just less desirable. I like playing all of them in Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. This is a great game if you're trying to introduce people to social deduction, because it also offloads a little bit of the pressure. It feels a little bit more loosey-goosey in structure.
A good game, but 30th best of all time, Neilan?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, Neilan, what are you talking about?
That is Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, my 30th favorite game.
Hello, my name is Michael Walker, 1/3 of So Very Wrong About Games. We have a podcast. Anyway, I've been asked to comment on an upcoming Board Game Barrage Top 50, which is weird because aren't they always doing a Top 50? Anyway, I am doing picks 30 to 21. So their picks for 30 are not bad at all. Taj Mahal by Reiner Knizia is a great game. It comes in their classic line. I have yet to try it. I definitely want to play it coming up soon. Modern Art is a great auction game. They've already probably talked about how it has a really cool auction system where the prices can go out of control until people sort of rein them in and lock down a certain system
Thanks,
to
Walker.
relegate their bidding. And Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, which is, in my opinion, the best hidden role game. It's got this fantastic 2-part system where you have a weapon and a clue, and there's a little sub game that you can play has come up with the best rock band name like Poison Scorpion or all sorts of silly stuff. So a nice little hidden game inside Murder in Hong Kong. So in all, I think Neilan wins that round. I don't know if you guys are doing winners, but I picked Neilan for that one.
We absolutely are.
Anyway, coming in.
I love how he's going to assign a winner every round. This is my kind of analysis.
Oh, someone going to be keeping count of that?
Yeah,
That's not how this works.
it's always how it works for me.
The list builds unto itself. All right, my 29th favorite board game of all time is new to the list this year, and it holds a spot in my collection, which is I got rid of it at one time, and I have since reacquired it. That love has reunited. Some say that love once gone shall never return, but I say that candle can be lit again. And this is Tom Lehman's Race for the Galaxy. Mark and I have had a fantastic time playing this game on Board Game Arena together. I am addicted to card games that are more than they appear. Now, in this case, the deck is pretty stacked. Like, you're not getting like a 50-card deck here and then having a big game. This is a big deck. This is a big boy game. Big deck. Big Boy deck. Race for the Galaxy has you building out a tableau, looking for card combos in the draw deck, and it all feels so natural because you have choices in terms of how deep you want to dig through the deck. How much do you want to be focused on like an exploratory thing? How much you want to be building out your planets organically and producing resources? I think that people who only play this online are missing out. And it's sort of that mentality where you have, you know, when you play a game and it's you versus a bunch of like stuffed animals. That's like what it's like when you're playing Race for the Galaxy online, because a big part of the game is the double bluff about what rounds do they want to go off. When you play this online, you're just like looking at a screen of nothing. You see what I mean? You look at the teddy bear and he gives you nothing. You can't see from the teddy bear. When you play this game in real life, you're like, oh, I see what Mark is up to. You know, I think he's going to pick this one, and so I want to synergize off that. There is more interactivity in how those decisions work than you get when you play it online. I love Race for the Galaxy. I have not really explored the expansions. I would love nothing more than to have a close friend that I could play this with over and over again with in person in real life. Thanks, Mark, for moving to Las Vegas. My 29th favorite board game of all time, Race for the Galaxy.
My 29th favorite game of all time is down 17 spots, but I still love it. I had a two-phase game earlier with number 36, Blue Lagoon. This is another two-phase hit, Francis Drake. I don't know if there's going to be another two-phase game on my list, but Francis Drake is a game where in the first phase, you are preparing your ships for the second phase, which is launching out and fighting pirates and conquering lands and gaining treasure. The thing that makes this game for me, and it's a mechanism that I like in many games like Paris, is where in outfitting your ship, you're moving up and down sort of a marketplace. And you can go as far as you want to get the goods that you think you'll need or that you think that other players will take out from under you. So you can go ahead and jump ahead and grab the Golden Hind if you want, which is a ship that only one player gets per exploration phase. But then you can no longer go back and get anything you've passed. I always love that system where you're agonizing over, am I going to try to max out and get as much as I can by playing it slow, or do I just want to get the best stuff and jump ahead? Recently got to play this again for the first time in a little while and loved it again. There's also a little bit of bluffing in the second phase and the exploration phase, which is a nice little touch, sort of bumping up the interactivity. And also, I think the production walks a very fine line between being cheesy and beautiful, and I think it walks it really well. I think it's just a great production. You've got these little treasure chests. Every round you're supplying the board with these gems that you're throwing in the treasure chest. Just a game that I really, really enjoy. You guys have not played this yet?
No, still not.
Nope.
I really want to.
Yeah, I really want to play this game with you guys. So Francis Drake, yes, my 29th favorite game of all time.
My 29th favorite game of all time is Gaia Project. This is up a couple of spots. This is the spiritual successor to Terra Mystica, or as I like to think of it, Terra Mystica 2.0. I think it is better than Terra Mystica in every way, except visually. I will give that. It looks like a garish plastic. Not a mess. It doesn't look that visually appealing. But that aside, mechanically, I think it's better. Terra Mystica and Gaia Project are both games about placing buildings, spreading out, and creating an engine that feeds off a little bit of other people's adjacent empires. You're all seeking the same land from each other, and it's a little bit of a race to see who gets to each of these territories first by virtue of who is able to terraform them into their appropriate color. Gaia Project takes this premise and takes it to a sci-fi theme, which is always a little bit more appealing to me. It does a couple of other things I really like in the conversion as well. It adds a variable setup. One of the things I don't like about Terra Mystica is that the openings are very scripted depending on your faction. Gaia Project alleviates that a little bit by making the map variable. There is also a lot of moving of all these systems to this combined tech track, which replaces the cult tracks in Terra Mystica, which also felt sort of arbitrary in that game. So it's just a nice combination of improvements that I think really feed off each other and really work well together in Gaia Project. This is a fairly heavy game, but one that is so satisfying to find the way to take your particular asymmetric faction and blend together their techs and their buildings and their resources into an engine that is going to get you ahead of other players more efficiently than they're doing it. It's a game I love returning to. It has just been implemented about a month or two ago on Board Game Arena, which is a new fantastic way to play this game online. I highly recommend checking out Gaia Project, my 29th favorite game of all time.
29. Race for the Galaxy has a great implementation on Board Game Arena. It's a time-tested card game, tons of symbology, lots of expansions, great pick, love it, everything about it. Francis Drake, on the other hand, so it's a top 50 list. This is coming in at 510 on Board Game Geek. And Francis Drake is a race to see who can reach the Spanish Main first. That sounds pretty exciting. Well, I wouldn't mind trying it, at least. I just have to make sure I have a lot of water. It was pretty dry just reading up about it. And then we have Gaia Project. Gaia Project is in my top 5. Board Game Geek's top 10. This is a great new addition by Capstone Games. It is a heavy manager resources, try to stay in the round longest, so you get to do more actions or actions that no one can react to. It's a fantastic game. Lots of different player powers because everyone plays a different race. Great game. Came off of Terra Mystica. In my opinion, a better game than Terra Mystica.
Walker agrees.
Oh, he didn't pick you to win, though.
Oh, so yeah. So
I mean, I think
he already
we
abandoned.
inferred
Close,
that.
yeah.
I think we inferred that.
I think it was a 3-way tie. Probably.
Hard to tell.
Why did I get
Who
roasted
can't
on
say?
that for a game he didn't even play? He roasted
Yeah,
me.
that's true. As dry as the water that Francis Drake rode across. My 28th favorite board game are a card game of all time is known by a few names, and it depends on who you ask. Krass, Kariert, Delt, and if you are Japanese or you prefer, Scout, which has a new edition that just came out from Oink Games that features a circus tent for some reason. Krass, Kariert / Delt / Scout, if you want, is a small box card game where you cannot arrange the cards in your hand, and you must try to make pairs and runs in a similar way that you would in any other traditional shedding game. But what makes it fun is that because you are only working with your hand as it sits, you are way limited in your options, but you have 2 cards in front of you. And with those cards, you can pass instead of participating and put that card anywhere you want in your hand to build up a little combo. And then when you play that combo, it's going to condense your hand, and then suddenly your hand's going to have a different combo in it. So it really is about evaluating when is the right time to go big. It is silly. It is almost a party game. Scout is not exactly the same game as Krass, Kariert, and Delt, which is literally the same game. Scout is a bit more strategic, a bit less loosey-goosey. It does not have the stop cards and some of the fun cards that happens in Krass, Kariert. This is a delight every time I get it out. I will say that based on my most recent play of Krass, Kariert, it is not a 5-player game, even though it says it is. It is a 4-player game. The box is lying to you. If you have played a lot of board games and you're looking for a new card game to spice up game night, I would highly recommend you look into this. An unusual game that does not get the love that it deserves. Scout is poppin'. People love Scout. My 28th favorite board game of all time, Krass, Kariert.
I've always loved my plays of Krass, Kariert, and Scout. My 28th favorite game of all time is new to the list, and art makes a reappearance on the list as this is an art-based game. This is The Gallerist by Vital Lacerda. There's a mood I sort of feel when I think about playing The Gallerist, and I was thinking sitting back and having like a sophisticated glass of wine, but then I realized he's also done Vinos, so it's hard to describe The Gallerist as his like sophisticated wine game, but that's the way The Gallerist feels to me. First, the production, which is not usually a big thing to me, but I love the production of The Gallerist. Like his other games, it's like a very big, heavy box, so you feel like you're in for an epic game night. And to further the artistic gallery theme, you've got these little easels where you're putting little paintings on. So it's a really nice production. Like all of Vital's games, it is a clockwork game where one action will trigger a bunch of different things cascading. Like most of his other games, all you're doing on your turn is taking a single action, potentially following an opponent's action. So on the surface, it appears like it's simple, but of course it's not. There's a lot of things to consider. But I think Gallerist, like Lisboa, which was also on my list earlier, I think it's done in a way where things are intuitive, things are clear and simple, or as simple as you could expect for a game that is heavy as this. It's a situation where you can intuit how your actions, even though they're going to cascade into something further down the line, you can sort of intuit how it's going to work based on the design of the game and the theme. They both sort of help make a heavy game easier to grok and to understand and to get to less on the spending your mental resources on how the rules go and more on how you want to play the game. Just a game that I really, really enjoy. It's a lot to chew on, but if you're looking for a heavy game night, if you're looking for an event game, the Gallerist is one that works for me. And again, it is new to my list at number 28.
A good heuristic for if you might like the Gallerist is one question. Did you like filling out the paperwork to get your mortgage? If so, you might enjoy each and every turn of Mr. Vitalacerta games.
My 28th favorite game of all time, much like Kellen's pick, is also a small box game with a funny German name. It is Doppelt so clever, or twice as clever as it's known in English. This is the sequel to Ganz schön clever. These are both roll and write games that have a very puzzly, comborific type feel to them, where you have multiple areas of your little play sheet denoted by different colors, and you roll 6 dice of 6 different colors and choose which dice you're going to use to allocate to each of those colored areas. But any die you choose eliminates from consideration for future turns the dice that are lower than it. So there's this element of like, okay, I could take the perfect 6 in yellow here, but then that limits my options drastically going forward in my turn. So there's a lot of really good considerations there. Each of these different colors is a different minigame that utilizes the dice in different ways. Sometimes you want them ascending. Sometimes you want to arrange them in a grid. Sometimes you want the sums of adjacent die values to be as big as possible or as small as possible. And what happens as you move down each of these tracks, you're triggering off bonuses all across your board. So you fill in a number here, which triggers a combo, which allows you to fill in a number here. And in the best possible situation, that is just popping off over and over again in a way that feels really, really satisfying. Twice as Clever is a pretty pure roll and write game, but I think it's one of the most satisfying in terms of just giving you that feeling like your best turns are so satisfying when they all come together in a beautiful way. That is Twice as Clever.
28, Krass Kariert. Haven't played that, so I can't really talk about it, but it does have a really, I'm sure Kellen's already talked about it, has the very interesting where you can't change what your hand's like, very much like Bonanza or Hanabi. So it's right up my alley. Wouldn't mind trying that game out. The Gallerist is a Vitalacerta. I have played almost all of his games. I have not played the Gallerist. I am actually doing On Mars in a couple of days again. So looking forward to trying the Gallerist. There's a couple of people in my group that have it. Definitely want to play it. Twice as Clever. Look, it's another roll and write with no theme. Now I'm sure they're all saying that, oh, roll and writes don't have theme, but there are. There's great roll and writes like Paper Dungeons and Cartographers. Check those out. Much better than, oh, look, there's a 6.
Oh, look, there's a 6, Neilan.
I am very intrigued about Paper Dungeons. I heard them talking about it in a recent episode, and I want to check it out.
I'm trying to change the subject. I finally got some reprieve. By him saying he didn't play it and just saying he had no comment on it was like my highlight so far.
I mean, he told me that mine was his favorite, Krass Kariert. I heard it.
Yeah.
My 27th favorite board game of all time is a very small 30-minute area control delight that is Rumble Nation. Rumble Nation uses a very small dice mechanism that I think is just fantastic, that has 2 essentially phases to it. It's the setup and it's the payoff. It's like a cannon that is just getting ready to go off, and then it goes off once. And once the cannon has erupted, the game is over. And so you roll 3 dice, and you use 2 of them to choose an area on the board. I believe starting at 2 and going to 12, and then you use the other dice to determine how many soldiers that you deploy into that battle. And you are trying to win as many battles as you can, but the battles will resolve just once in order, and whoever wins the battle will get to spill reinforcements into other battles that cascade into other battles. So the order in which things happen determines how you're going to get reinforcements and also how many victory points each location is worth. So the puzzle is set when you start the game of Rumble Nation, and you are rolling the dice and tactically deciding how best to influence that madness. A delightful little production that I had to import, and one that I could not ever see myself getting rid of, that functions really well in that super filler range where it feels like you're playing a real thing, but you're done with it in 30 minutes. I don't know that I've ever had a bad game of this, all the way from 2 players to 4. Just one that is a delight from start to finish. My 27th favorite game, Rumble Nation.
My 27th favorite game of all time is back on the list after being off last year. I brought a bunch of games to PAX Unplugged because BGB was doing the official math trade, and I traded a bunch of games in the math trade. But there were a couple games that I brought just with the intention of playing them. One will appear higher on the list, but the other is this one, which is Panic on Wall Street. Also, the early edition is called Masters of Commerce, which is the edition I have. The reason I brought this is because we played this with BGBers, Bugbears at Shucks 2019, and it was one of the most fun board game experiences I've ever had. Panic on Wall Street or Masters of Commerce are simultaneous auction bidding games where half the players are going to be investors, the other half are going to be managers. Managers sort of managing businesses, trying to get investors to invest in them, but multiple players can manage the same type of commodity. Multiple investors can try to buy into the same commodity. So I might be wanting to buy into, say, the blue commodity, and Neilan and Kellen might both have it, and they are simultaneously just trying to convince me to buy it from them. You know, Neilan is promising me $1 off the price, and then Kellen refuses to, and then last second Kellen says, okay, do it with me right now, and I'll knock $3 off the price. So you have this like shouting across the table, and this is a game that can handle up to 11 players. So there's a lot of shouting, a lot of negotiation, a lot of screaming for 2 minutes, and then after the shares have been sold and bought, you're rolling dice to see how the share prices move, which is a bit of randomness, obviously, but the different types of companies have different ways that they will rise and sink in price. Some are very volatile, some are just nice and steady. So you have some bit of information as to how they're going to rise and decline. And if you're a manager, you win if you're the best manager, if you're the most profitable manager. If you're an investor, you win by being the best investor of the bunch. So this is a game where there's 2 winners. And I just love the frantic nature of it. I'm a big fan of the classic game Pit, and this feels like Pit, but sort of a little more, I mean, it's not a one-to-one analogy, but it feels like you have the franticness of Pit. You have like that stripped down economy idea of Pit, but with a little more game mechanisms that I think enhance the experience. So my 27th favorite game of all time is Panic on Wall Street.
My 27th favorite game of all time is Azul. This has moved up 3 spots this year, bolstered by having played this in person. One of the few games I played quite a bit in person last year, introducing this to non-gamers who loved it. It kind of just reassured how great this game is, how approachable it is, and how much fun I had even revisiting it as many times as I have. This has also just been released in Board Game Arena, which means I'll probably get even more plays of it. And I just don't see myself tiring of this. I think the thing that Azul does in this realm of sort of puzzly game is by being deceptively mean. If you get stuck with the big bundle of tiles that you cannot place on your board, it hurts. You get a lot of negative points, and you can kind of see it coming as people are all jostling not to be the person left holding the bag at the end. It's brutal, but it's also just very satisfying when you line everything up and score big in a game of Azul. I did play with Summer Pavilion for the first time this year and didn't really hit as hard as the original Azul does. I'm still eager to try Sintra, which I believe is Kellen's favorite.
That's true, but I loved the game for whatever reason you said on Friday night at PAX Unplugged. You forced before you play to play it with us, and wow, what a good 4-player game we had of it.
It was great. I mean, again, it just never fails. Azul never lets you down, huh? That is my 27th favorite game of all time, Azul.
I really enjoy the Board Game Arena implementation. It's really got me playing it. It's been a while since I played it, just because I felt like I burnt out on it because it was so popular and so hot for a while there. But the Board Game Arena implementation got me playing again, and I really enjoy it.
No one invited me.
27. Great picks for 27. Rumble Nation. Kellen picks a game from Japan that no one's heard of. Unpossible. No, Kellen, no one's heard of it. It's ranked 3,200. No one.
What?
Panic on Wall Street. Note to self, have lots of water and be well hydrated when playing games with Mark.
That's right. You're damn right.
Azul. Great tile laying game, great gateway game, great way to get people into the hobby. Definitely not my top 50, but I guess a fairly solid pick.
I'll take it.
My 26th favorite board game of all time is the highest rated Oink game on my list. Oh, how the pigs have fallen. This is Startups. Startups is a super great card game of chicken. You are investing in companies and trying to hide which companies you actually care about to get people at the end. For whatever reason, I feel like I am a savant at this game. I am a card shark, and the people that I am getting are the kind, naive people like Neilan and Christina. The fun way that the game resolves is that whoever has played out the most shares in a corporation is paid out by those who have also invested in that corporation but have less shares than you. And so what that means is you are trying to hide what you are investing in. Who is the fire eater amongst you? You are picking up cards from an array and or from a blind draw and then putting cards face up in front of you and discarding cards. There are some fun little twists, like an anti-monopoly rule, which prevents you from investing further in a company publicly, picking up those cards until other players have surpassed you. Just a delightful card game, beautiful production. If you're looking for a gift of a small box, it is this vibrant, what color is it? Cyan? It's a crazy color, a cyan color. This is not relevant, so we shall cut it.
Wait, isn't Startups pink?
No. The accent color is pink, but the color is like lime green and pink. But cyan, I'm tempted to, because I don't know what color cyan is.
Cyan is like blue.
Oh, chartreuse is what I meant. And I thought chartreuse was red, because whenever someone would do something wrong, I would scream at them, chartreuse. But it's actually Jacques from, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, from Les Miserables.
Is that what that's from?
No.
I think it's from Sherlock Holmes.
Jacques. Yeah, it's from... I don't know
Anyway,
what it's from. I think it might be
this
from
is important. The color of the box is chartreuse, kind of, but more lime plus pink. And
So
it's
yeah,
awesome.
if you're looking to buy this game, just go by like color of box. Don't read the words on it. Just go by box color.
Mark, if you put this in the main episode, it's sabotage. I'll know you're sabotaging the show. So don't you even dare you think about that. You think about that. My 6th, the best Oink game, Startups. Thank you.
Patrons will be familiar with my 26th favorite game of all time as we play a round or two of it before every bonus episode. This is a question of Scruples. I'm just going to call it in advance that as almost surely the lowest rated game on BGG of any of our lists of the top 50, Walker is going to rip me to shreds. This is a 4.7 on BGG. And yet it has gone up 13 spots on my list. A Question of Scruples is a lot like True Colors, which is a game that has dropped on my list because I think you have to play it with people that you know and trust and feel comfortable with. Question of Scruples has some bite because what you're doing basically are asking these moral dilemma questions and trying to guess how people are going to answer and then discuss in its best form. You discuss the answers and sort of learn about people's morality, actually. But what I think has improved Question of Scruples for me, whereas True Colors has dipped a little bit, is the fact that, again, these are just questions you could ask to anybody. You could play this with any group. In fact, I played this once with some non-gamers who I play soccer with, and one of them was a teacher, and she asked to borrow it to curate the questions. She definitely picked out questions that were appropriate for the class, but she used it for her ESL class when trying to encourage non-native speakers to learn English. So it's a game that just encourages conversation. And if I want to play a game that encourages conversation, I want it to be a little bit spicy, a little bit interesting, a little bit thought-provoking. So for me, my 26th favorite game of all time is A Question of Scruples.
For example, if you accidentally but did lock your friend out of their apartment, should you pay for the locksmith? All that and more in A Question of Scruples.
Scruples question. My 26th favorite game of all time is Werewords. This is I'm going to call it a spiritual successor, but it is a game that was heavily borrowed from Oink's Insider. Werewords takes the Insider formula, which is, put simply, a game of 20 questions where you have a hidden traitor. Potentially someone who knows what the word is, but is intentionally trying to misdirect everyone at the table. So people are asking questions of the person who knows what the word is. Is it small? Can you buy it on Amazon? Is it a person, a place, a thing? And that person is answering only yes or no. But the player that is trying to misdirect them might be asking questions that will lead away from the solution, or might be being deliberately obtuse and wasting time. And if by the time the time runs out, the group hasn't figured out what the word is, that person wins. Now, Werewords adds another twist to this, in that there is a seer that is also in the group that also knows what the word is and is intentionally trying to get the team to guess the word correctly. But if the werewolf player, who's the traitor, figures out who the seer is, then the werewolves win anyway. There's another twist that could happen on this, where the werewolf might be the person who's actually answering the questions. So they might be deliberately misleading the team because they don't want them to, in fact, guess the word. So there's a couple of interesting ways that the game of Werewords can play out while still just using this core structure from Insider that I think is really solid all on its own. And I just happen to like a lot of the twists that Werewords layers on top of this. I think it does make the game, especially the game end, a little bit more convoluted, but typically, even with non-gamers, I've had rounds of this go off swimmingly, and people are generally getting it within a couple of rounds. And it's one of those games that you start once, and then you're just playing all night. It's so rewarding, it's so repetitive, and it's just so quick, and anyone can pick it up within a short amount of time. That is Werewords, my 26th favorite game of all time.
Startups is a Oink game. I've not played that one yet either. I know Kellen has a ton of Oink games. I've played quite a few. They had a Kickstarter recently, so I ordered a bunch. Great little games. This Startups has hilarious company names like Food Chain Magnet, and it looks like a very interesting game. I want to try it. A Question of Scruples.
Here it comes.
It's from 1984, and I think that leads to the charm of this game. It's like I've read a bunch of questions from it, and just the way that it's slightly dated, slightly a little more innocent than it is nowadays. I think that totally leads into a great game.
Wow.
Werewords. Terrible game for terrible people.
Oh, great. I win.
What?
Love it.
How dare you?
Perfect.
I love even games he's never played. He's like, terrific game, and then he gets to yours, terrible game for a terrible person. That's what I heard, right?
Yep.
Terrible game, terrible person.
Wow, that was a twist.
Uncool.
I thought I was going to get destroyed on that one.
My 25th favorite board game of all time is a Euro game. I like Euro games. This Euro game happens to be called Keyflower. Keyflower combines a lot in a relatively simple rule set. It is a complicated game, but it is not as complicated as, for example, filling out a mortgage application. In Keyflower, you can use your workers to bid on tiles, which are in a couple of different colors, and you can only bid on tiles in the color that other players have started the auction in. So everyone has a different amount of different colored meeples behind their screen, and you don't know, and you're trying to figure out who's got what of what. That already is the makings of a great simple game, similar to Fafnir from Oink Games, which uses that a little bit. But you combine that with the fact that you can use those workers to actually perform worker placement on worker placement spots instead of bidding in the auction. So every turn, you have to decide, should I continue to participate in these auctions, or should I use those workers to worker place? Worker place being the verb here. In addition to that, you can use those workers in other people's tableaus. And you're like, well, why would you acquire hexes and create a tableau if other people could use your spots? Well, because when they come to your town, you get those workers, and then you get to use them in a subsequent auction. Mark,
Idiot.
you dum-dum? Yeah, you idiot. This game has a relatively straightforward arc of spring, summer, fall, winter, and then the game ends where sort of the beginnings are about building the engine, and then there's a conversion to trying to just sort of get victory points, and then the last phase is a lot of victory scoring tiles. I find that the game ends before I want it to, before I have an efficient engine going, and that is one of the hallmarks of a good Euro for me, that feeling like if I just run it back, I'm going to get a little bit better. But this is a high interaction Euro, which in many ways makes it not a Euro, because Euro means low interaction. This is Keyflower, my 25th favorite board game of all time.
I feel like if I played Keyflower more, it'd be on my list for sure.
Solid. Rock solid.
Rock solid, exactly.
It's
I don't know,
solid.
Walker. Do you want to say rock solid again?
Rock solid.
Perfect. Great. Love it. I don't know what Walker is going to think of my 25th favorite game of all time, but if longtime BGB listener Woggers was critiquing, I would definitely win this round, because my 25th favorite game of all time is Lancaster. Lancaster is an old Euro, but it does what I think old Euros can do best, which is be straightforward, simple rule set, but super interactive and with some really interesting, clean mechanisms. So Lancaster, in a lot of ways, is a sort of a typical Euro. You know, you've got worker placement, you've got some area majority, area control sort of things going on. But what it really boils down to are these two really novel mechanisms, which are my favorite part of Lancaster. So the primary way you're doing this worker placement, which is the bulk of the game, is you're placing your knight out, and your knights can be assigned numbers from 1 to 4, and it's basically the strength of your position in a spot. So if I put my 4 knight in an area, I've got 4 points, and for someone to displace me, they've got to get 5 points into that area to knock me out. And the way they do that, and the way that you can bolster any worker that you put out, is by adding these squires. So squires are units that you can add with your knight, so you must place them at the same time, and they bolster the strength of the knight. And it's just a 1-to-1 addition. So if I put my 2 knight out there and I add 3 squires, my strength there is 5. So for somebody to displace me, they'd have to exceed that. But the thing is that when you are displaced, you get your knight back, so you can replace them later in the round, and so it's not lost. However, you do lose all your squires. So there's a brinkmanship to trying to figure out how many squires you want to put out, because you can't just simply say, oh, Neilan's got 3 points out there, I'll put my 3-point knight out there and add 1 squire, because Neilan is likely to just knock that out if it's a spot that he really wants. So it's a situation where you've got to gamble. You've got to add more squires than you need, but just the right amount that you think will sort of fend off potential attackers for the spot. I love that sort of brinksmanship and that sort of like push your luck aspect to it. The other aspect that I love about Lancaster is at the end of every round, there are laws that are put up for vote. And you see these laws ahead of the round, so you know the laws that are going to be put up for vote. And one of the resources you can get are votes. And what these laws are sort of ways to score victory points. So this is where you get a little bit of a negotiation aspect to it. You may notice that there's a law that you really want to be passed, and you know that one of your opponents wants another law to be passed, but maybe a third opponent wants none of the laws to be passed. And so you can work with your fellow competitors to say, hey, toss me a couple votes on this one. Let's get this one passed. I'll toss you a couple votes on the next one to get that passed, and we can block this third player from foiling both of our plans. So that's an aspect that you don't see in a lot of Euro games, and it's certainly not a huge part of Lancaster, but it's definitely there, and it's just done in a really nice way, a way that I really appreciate. So another old school Euro that does a lot of things well, that if it was released today, I think would be just as good as anything that is in the modern age of board games. So my 25th favorite game of all time is Lancaster.
My 25th favorite game of all time, in much the same way that Mark wishes that Woggers was presiding over this pick instead of Walker, I wish we had Mark Bigney, who I know is a huge fan of Spirit Island, presiding over this pick. Spirit Island is a fantastic cooperative game that is quite heavy. It feels like the cooperative game that you graduate up to once you've played a bunch of heavy Euros, because it's very much in that vein of being more about resource conversion and hand management and very complicated combos that sort of play off of each other and other players. It is a longer cooperative game, but I think the theming for this is so sublime. You are native spirits of an island trying to wrest control of the island away from colonists who are invading. And the way that the game represents this by differentiating between wooden pieces and plastic pieces, I think is just such a smart design choice aesthetically. This is also a game where the asymmetry between each of these spirits is the huge part of the appeal. You have very, very diverse powers. Spirits that use the water to sort of push and pull colonists out to sea. Spirits that use wild animals to use against the colonists. There's just a bunch of different mechanics that are only relevant to certain spirits. And one of the joys of playing Spirit Island is A, trying a different spirit, and B, seeing how that spirit combines with the other spirits that your fellow players are using. There are also a whole bunch of different ways you can vary this up with different adversaries. It is a fantastic game. I'm a huge fan of Spirit Island. This has dropped one spot this year, only by virtue of the fact that I've not had a chance to play it that much in the pandemic. That is Spirit Island.
The 25 picks. Now, this is key, right? Because we all know what they're going to pick for number one. There'll be no surprise there. So this 25, it's the middle of the list. It's much more important than you'd think. And these picks reflect that. All three of these are fantastic games. Keyflower, I'm sure they've all talked about this. I don't know how much they want me to talk about this. These are great picks. Keyflower, auction system. Wish it was used in more games. If you start an auction in a certain color, you can only activate those tiles or increase the bid with those colors. Great game. Lancaster is an older worker placement with everything so tight. You start building up your workers so they can open up more spaces. Every space matters, unlike some other worker placement. Spirit Island, it's a great co-op. It's not a game for me, but I can appreciate how interesting it is. It has a little too much deck milling, in my opinion. Like, you're just constantly trying to mill through these spell decks to try to get the combos you want. That kind of mechanism just doesn't blend well with me, but you're kicking the colonialists off your island. Great theme, fantastic game.
Seemed like a draw.
No, I don't know about that. I don't know. I feel like I'm winning.
I'm surprised. I thought that was going to be a Neilan round for sure. I thought Spirit Island, what's so very wrong about games, would be a win.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, I know Mark Bigney talks about Spirit Island a lot, but I couldn't remember how much of a fan Walker was. Well, now we know.
My 24th favorite board game of all time is a light economic game. This is Smartphone Inc. I believe this is on Mark's list higher up. Just a beautiful production, a quick, smooth playing area sort of control game where you are producing smartphones and trying to outprice and outmaneuver the competition into getting into different markets all across the country, investing in technologies that they may not be interested in order to gain a competitive advantage. This game uses a very rigid structure that feels a little like a merry-go-round of rounds where you just do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And sometimes that makes a game feel static. But everything else in Smartphone Inc. is so crazy with how it builds and waxes and wanes that it never feels bad. And that round structure actually just helps keep the game moving. At the beginning of each round, you're pricing your phones and then figuring out who is going to be able to sell the most that round. And so you may try a very expensive phone strategy, but boutique phones, complete with 4G. The world has moved on to 5G, but not in Smartphone Inc. The world is still on 4G. And you could be the bargain basement eBay seller selling, $1 smartphones to anyone who will buy them with Nokia screens and monochrome, nothing. Barely gets, the text messages still cost 10 cents per message on these phones. And you could sell in bulk all across the world. Smartphone Inc. is a great distillation of an economic game that will appeal to more Euro players. It'll appeal to people who like interactivity. I have never had a bad game of this. I know that when you get to the lower player counts, there are other boards that you need to use that you may or may not have to buy. I love this one. I would never turn down a game of Smartphone Inc. I also really adore the theme. I feel like it's underused and reminds me in some ways of Food Chain Magnate, which is a game that allows you to be a mean businessman and doesn't revolve around murdering people.
If you are into murdering people, my 24th favorite game of all time will offer you some of that. This is the second PAX game on our collective lists. This is PAX Pamir 2nd Edition. The first thing you'll notice when you play PAX Pamir is the production. It is unbelievable. I don't know if it's ceramic, but the pieces have this sort of ceramic-like feel to them. This game has, I think it's only a cloth board, right? There's only a cloth board. I don't think there is a cardboard variety. So it's a very lush production, just to start with. This also goes to the cards. The cards at least for me, are lovely. They've got and this is why it's so high on my list, they've got like a history book look to them, which I love. If you listen to the show for some time, you'll know that I'm a sucker for games that have a historical theme and sort of really sink their teeth into it, and Pax Pamir certainly does. This is a game about the 19th century fight for the Afghan land between the Afghani people, the Russians, and the British. And through the game, you are potentially switching factions between the three as their strength ebbs and flows across the countryside. Like other PAX games, this is a sort of a tableau builder where you're buying cards off a card row, and then you are putting them in your tableau. They activate in interesting ways, and it's just a super, super well-built game with, as I've sort of alluded to, some novel mechanisms. But what, again, really cinches it for me, even above the production, is just how rich the historical connection is. I've said this before, but it's a game where there's a lot to think about, but I don't really ever mind people taking a long time on their actions, because I just read about these characters from history and these events from history on these cards that are chock full of this flavor text that sometimes I can take and leave, but in cases where it's been well researched, I just find fascinating. So I just sit there reading these cards and learning about these people throughout history, and I just love it. So my 24th favorite game of all time is Pax Pamir 2nd edition.
Pamir Gate, never forget. My 24th favorite game of all time is by the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia. This is The Quest for El Dorado. This is a fantastic, approachable deck-building game that is a race. This is something that you probably catch me saying frequently. I do like a board game that gets rid of victory points and makes the victory condition as simple as be the first person to finish. It's just a very easy way to get someone that doesn't play a lot of board games instantly on board. Get your person from this end of the track to the other end of the track and introducing them to deck building in the process. In Quest for El Dorado, you have a variety of cards that allow you to move through the different terrains, and purchasing those cards and adding them to your deck at the appropriate time and in the appropriate amount in order to get across the terrain without bogging your deck down with cards that you won't need once you get past a certain point. It's all very well giving yourself a lot of ways to get across the water in the first half of the map, but then you have all those cards in your deck for the second half of the map. These are all the considerations you have to bring to mind to get through a Quest for El Dorado, but it's still beautifully simple. There's a lot of fun to be had with blocking other players, easy to teach people, a lot of variety that can come through the maps and the expansions that already exist. This is just one of my go-to favorite, pleasant, feel-good games. I will never not be happy to play The Quest for El Dorado.
24 picks. Smartphone Inc. This is one game that got away from me. I haven't tried it yet. It is in our group. I'm going to be playing it very soon. Great buzz on that. Good pick. Pax Pamir 2nd edition. Very crunchy game if you want a game that has tons of different ways to end it, and you have to keep, it's not a game you can sit back and wait for your turn. You have to be constantly watching what everyone is doing and what every single action they're doing to see how they're advancing different end game states, so you can try to block them or point it out so other people can block them. Great game. 2nd edition. It has fantastic quality. Quest for El Dorado, another great Reiner Knizia game. Deck builder done right. Fantastic.
We're getting the quota of Walker Fantastic, so I'm happy to hear that.
My 23rd favorite board game of all time needs no introduction to the hobbyist or the non-hobbyist, and that is Codenames. Codenames, if there was a price per dollar of gaming goodness, I saw this for $9 during Black Friday. $9 you can have Codenames. First of all, thing I'd like to say, this is the only good game that this designer has ever made. Let's move on. Number 2, wow. In a game of Codenames, you are trying to provide clues for a disparate set of words on a grid that is sort of like Minesweeper, where you really want them to get some words, you really don't want them to get a certain word, and if they guess certain words, that's helping the other team. So let's say that your words were corn dog, cotton candy, and acrobat. You would be a very smart person if you came up with the word circus, which puts those 3 concepts together into one thing. Hey, wait a minute. Do all these words have to do with circus? Could it be? You guess circus. Boom, you unlock. Boom, you unlock. Boom, you unlock. And it is a race to beat the other team and to not get got, either helping them unintentionally win the game or the forbidden word, which has plenty of drama. There are downsides to a game of Codenames. It is a word/party game, and anyone who plays it as too wordy or too party may not get along with other players who want to play it in one specific way. Our group plays it, of course, in the best way possible, which is to just talk the entire time while anyone is trying to guess. It is a delight. I have never been tired of playing Codenames. It will always be with me. I will be buried with Codenames. Thank you. My 23rd favorite board game of all time, Codenames.
That counts as your official will. I'd like to have you.
Yeah, well, this is... One of us is a lawyer, right?
Right, yeah, no.
Yeah, good.
I don't know if Neilan's law degree holds up in the U.S., but we can just ship your body to South Africa and bury it there.
And then with Codenames.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah,
that's the reason.
But I'll have maybe 5 copies by then at $8.99.
Yeah, exactly. I'll bring a copy of Codenames Marvel for you.
What? No.
I'm going to guarantee you. Just to spite you, I'm going to make sure that the copy of Codenames you're buried with is Codenames Marvel.
You think you have authority to figure out what I'm buried with?
I'm talking to Neilan. We're going to take your body to South Africa.
He does have
You
the authority.
guys have authority?
Yeah. You're now legally bound, and I know that because I'm a lawyer.
Okay.
Well, my 23rd favorite game of all time might not be as fun as that exchange we just had, but it's a game that I love. It's a game that's not for everybody, for sure. A type of game that I love are economic games and tough economic games. And my 23rd favorite game of all time is Container. Container is a brutal economic game where you are all producers of goods, shippers of goods, and buyers of goods. So you're all producing goods that other players around the board are trying to buy, and then you're all shipping the same goods. There's a lot that goes into this game, but it's a game of incremental gains. You are producing a good for some amount of money. You want to try to sell it for just $1 more if you can, depending on what the market is. You know, if you've got a number of players at the table that are producing the same type of good, now you're in trouble. Am I going to shift to being a person who is trying to just ship them? Or am I going to move away from this production aspect? It's just a game of small gains and trying to find your niche and trying to take advantage of it when you can. You have to read the state of the table. You have to read what other players are doing and try to take advantage of little inconsistencies and little areas of the market where you can sort of hop in and maximize your gain. We got a chance to play this with some of the folks from Shut Up and Sit Down a little bit earlier. I had a great time. I don't know if you guys are fans of this game, but for me, it's just a super heavy economic game, but the rule set is quite small. It's just brutal and so incremental that I know it turns a lot of people off.
I admire like the absurd sandbox that is Container, but I think I don't love it.
Yeah, I get that for sure.
I prefer the sandbox that is Halo.
My 23rd favorite game of all time is a Dr. Double feature. This is another Knizia game, Blue Lagoon. This is a game that plays in 2 phases, and Mark, I know you like a 2-phase game. In the first phase of Blue Lagoon, you are placing boats that then reach the islands and can eventually become huts to set up for the second half of the game. In the second half of the game, you must start at your huts and then send your people moving outwards from those huts. You are trying to move across the lagoon. You are trying to move across the islands in order to achieve a bunch of different scoring objectives, whether that's collecting resources that straight up give you victory points, resources that you'll need to complete sets, connecting different islands together, having the majority of pieces on an island. This is a fiercely competitive game where as you're placing these pieces, you're blocking the routes of other players, securing your connections between the islands, securing your majorities on the islands, and trying to get to resources before other players do. It has a very Go-like feel of I'm going to do this in the hope that I'm going to be able to secure this half of the board, stop you and cut you off. It's also a beautiful, vibrant, colorful game that I think is very teachable, not necessarily to non-gamers. There has to be a little bit of trust that they will get past the multitude of scoring objectives, but if they do, the game is so rewarding and so simple, but endlessly strategically complex. That is Blue Lagoon by Dr. Rainer Knizia.
23. Nice clutch pick by Kellen. Fairly generic Codenames. It wins all party games hands down. Easy to teach, easy to pick up, tons of fun. Container, have not played it. Just had a new Jumbo 10th Anniversary Edition. Blue Lagoon, another Rhino Crinicy game. See, these guys know what the power of the Doctor is. Blue Lagoon has this fantastic 2-stage game. One where you're like sort of populating the board with your presence, and then in the second phase, you sort of expand out from that presence. Great game.
All right. We are rounding the corner here. My 22nd favorite board game of all time is new to the list for this year, and it is a better tile-laying game from the only true and living Doctor. This is Babylonia. Babylonia only did not make my list last year because I felt like I had not played it enough. I have now played it enough, and wow, whoa boy, oh boy.
Classic Kellen line.
Oh, goody, we have a winner. It combines things that I love in board gaming. It forces you into smaller tactical decisions by virtue of only letting you have a hand of 5 tiles versus the whole bag that you start with. It is having you make decisions about starting to score now versus establishing a network across the board. It has special powers that you can use. It has a lot of ways to score, and at the end of the game, you don't have to fill out a score sheet to figure out who won, like in Blue Lagoon. With that said, it does bury some of that annoyance in the round-to-round scoring. It has some odd systems where when you score one type of building, everyone else who also has those buildings will score all the buildings that they have, so it encourages you to get in and get in early, because every time that scores, you're going to score again. It does commit the cardinal sin of Euro design, which is basically everything you do is going to score you different amounts of points. And in the game, you're always feeling like a tightrope walker, trying to decide whether you're going to build out that network across the board or whether you're going to score right now. It's back and forth. Mark is going to cut you off. It's that tightness that makes Babylonia one of my favorite board games of all time. But it is also lengthwise. It is also very short in comparison to the decisions that you make. I was about to say light and breezy. Okay, I was going to say light and breezy, and then I realized it's not. Babylonia is way heavier than stupid Blue Lagoon that Neilan brought you. I'm bringing you Babylonia. You should buy it. You should play it. It's great. My 22nd favorite board game of all time is Babylonia.
These two are squabbling, and yet I have double crossovered with both of you. Both with Kellen's Babylonia and with Neilan's Blue Lagoon. So
who's
I'm
higher? Who's higher?
Blue Lagoon.
Never mind, I didn't ask that. Go back. Take that part out.
So Kellen claims that this designer's only made one good game in Codenames, but I disagree because there is a game of his that I like even more, and that is my 22nd favorite game of all time, Pictomania. Kellen, would you agree?
Still garbage.
Pictomania is a very simple game to explain. What it is Pictionary, but you are both drawing and guessing at the same time. That's what the game boils down to, basically. You are trying to get people to guess what you're drawing while simultaneously guessing what they're drawing. I just love that. It's simple, and I just love it. Another aspect of it that is a nice little fun twist is that if you want to play with progressively harder and harder things to draw, you can, and it can get pretty wild. You can go from drawing like dogs and cats in the first round to like faith and philosophy in the final round if you want to increase the difficulty. And that's a twist that I always like doing in Pictomania. But just that simple premise of Pictionary with drawing and guessing at the same time is enough to make it a game that I love. My 22nd favorite game of all time, Pictomania.
Love Pictomania. It's a game I always love to bring up when people talk about how Codenames was a surprising design for Vlada. He'd already made an even better party game.
Yeah, you idiots.
My 22nd favorite game of all time is Inish, which is down 8 spots on my list, particularly because it is very lengthwise. I have not had
mocking me.
I have not had games of this that recently, especially, that I feel like have been as fast as I want them to be. While I really love Inish, I sometimes am starting to feel like it overstays its welcome just a touch, which is why it slipped down my list a little bit this year. But that said, Inish is still such a beautifully simple troops in a map game where the chief mechanic is drafting, card drafting. All of the actions you can take of the game are listed on the cards you have. It is a very small card pool that stays the same from game to play, with some slight variances for player count. But other than that, it is largely the same pool of cards. And that means that if you, over the course of multiple games with repeat players, people will know what is on all of those cards. They will know the power of each of those cards. They will be aware that the Geist is there waiting to block their carefully planned move. And that's what the game starts to boil down to, is the anticipation of what the other cards that might be in other players' hands are. You season that with the Epic Tale cards, which are these super powered cards that give you some really fun abilities that crop up throughout the game. And it just is the perfect amount of spice to stop that small card pool from feeling too deterministic and too generic. Inish is great. It feels completely different every time you play it. It has a huge dose of negotiation built into it. In fact, the core combat mechanic is practically a negotiation mechanic. Inish is really cool. I wish I could get the length of my games down of it just a touch, but that might be much more of a player problem than a game problem. That is Inish.
22, another Reiner Knizia game, Babylonia. Spreading it across the board, trying to create these interesting chains. Reiner Knizia does it right. Pictomania, have not played it. From the description, you're drawing and trying to guess at the same time. Definitely a party game that I would love.
What?
Innis. Now, in Innis, every mechanism in this game separately is perfection. Everything is fantastic, down to like the deck of action cards, the special abilities, the way you move around the board. But it never comes together just because people are dumb. There'll be one person that doesn't get how it works, and if you have one weak chain in the link of that is Innis, the game falls apart.
True.
I actually 100% agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a frequent Mark complaint about Inish that it doesn't quite come together as well as the sum of its parts.
Yeah, it's like so.
No, he's saying don't play with dummies, not that there's something wrong with the game.
That too.
I think Inish is that. I think Inish is like every part of it is great, and then when it comes together, it doesn't work.
It's funny, Mark, because that has not been my experience with the majority of times I've played Inish.
Nope. Super good. Rounding the corner to our 21st favorite board games of all time. Earlier in this episode, you heard me critique Neilan, and I told him that Deception, Murder in Hong Kong was not the 30th best board game of all time, and that's because it's the 21st best board game of all time.
Double crossover too, right?
You didn't think about that, you idiot.
I did.
Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is a great hidden trader game for those who don't like the pressure of being on the spot. It feels like a house of mirrors as you walk around and look at all the wares that people have. Like, what could it be, that knife? You know, is a knife more or less violent than a chainsaw? And what I love about Deception is watching how people argue, because it's very clear that a chainsaw is more violent than a knife, yet somehow Neilan is like trying to convince the whole table that it's, well, you know, chainsaw, you could use a chainsaw for other things, and I'm like, are you people crazy? That is what it feels like to play Deception Murder in Hong Kong against Neilan, a very good shadow. I love this game. I have not tired of it. I think that the expansion does help open it up a lot. I think it's in the perfect weight class where you're not tryharding the shit out of it like you might get with a seasoned group of Resistance LARPers who only play Resistance. Deception works really well for a much wider group of players, and that is why it is my 21st favorite board game of all time.
My 21st favorite game of all time is City of the Big Shoulders. It's got a lot of what I love, which is, in this case, heavy economic game. It's got a little bit of a 18xx flavor to it, and it's got a nice dash of historicity in it, as well as you are playing as business leaders in Chicago during the Industrial Revolution. I like to think of City of the Big Shoulders in an interesting place when it comes to this imagined spectrum in my mind of Euro games on one side and 18xx on the other. So you got Euro games on one side, you've got your standard 18xx on the other, and I think there are two games that sort of fit in the middle. One is going to come later up on my list, and that is the game that is slightly more on the 18xx side. This is the game that is slightly more on the Euro side. So this is like sort of like in the middle, but slightly more on the Euro side. City of the Big Shoulders just has touches of 18xx while not being about trains, while not having a map at all, but yet it has the stock manipulation and the sort of business management that you have in 18xx games. But it's a great way if you're interested in some of those aspects of 18xx. Maybe you're not a person who likes the spatial aspect of 18xx games at all, which I would completely understand, but like the economic side of it, City of the Big Shoulders is a great game for those kind of folks. Just a game I really, really enjoy. It also has an implementation on BGA, which I love for it making the game more accessible and available to people. Not a game that I prefer playing on digital implementations just because of the length, and if you're playing turn-based, it can take a while to get through a game, but just a really, really well done blending of Euro game plus 18xx. My 21st favorite game of all time is City of the Big Shoulders, up 5 spots from last year.
I really wanted to put City of the Big Shoulders on my top 50. Again, this is a cliche, but this is like at 51 or 52 on my list. It was that close to making my list. Love that game. My 21st favorite game of all time actually surprised me by how much I just wanted to keep nudging it up my list. It's moved up 21 spots this year from 42. It is the Oracle of Delphi. This is my favorite Feld game. I played this a lot online in 2020 and 2021. And the reason it's moved up so much is actually because I knew it was a game I liked. It was already my favorite Feld, as it's been on my top 50, I think, for the entire duration that we've been doing these lists. But I don't think I appreciated just how clever the design was until I ended up playing a lot more than I had up until that point. It is a game that a lot of people might detract from being too luck heavy because of how dice that you are rolling factor into your decisions. But I think the thing that is so genius about this design is how dice mitigation is baked into the core of it. It is a game where if you are not adequately setting yourself up to maximize your benefit and to maximize the shortcomings of the dice, then you are failing at the game. It has multiple mechanics by virtue of favor tokens and ways to utilize bad dice in order to set yourself up for future turns that I think are just brilliant. It also just has this structure that I think can be deceptive to people, where the tiebreakers feel like they're too important, but really seasoned players realize that the tiebreakers are what the game is. If you are not adequately setting yourself up to have Oracle cards, to have favor tokens, then you're not playing the game of Oracle of Delphi correctly. It's a game about moving around the board, completing tasks before anyone else, which also makes it another race game. Again, just a fantastic benefit in a sea of Feld's Euro point salad games. This one sort of stands out amongst them for me. This is The Oracle of Delphi by Stefan Feld.
So lastly, there are 21 picks. We have already talked about Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Great hidden role movement. There's tons of different roles. It's one of these things where everyone's trying to find the murderer, but you don't know one of the people in the actual group that's helping you try to solve the case is the murderer, so he's trying to slightly throw off the guessing. Great game. City of Big Shoulders. I was told it was sort of like a 18xx light. If you like math, then you like this game. You definitely have to sort of multiply out what all the goods are going to be worth, and you can really min-max your turns, and that type of thing is not for me. Oracle of Delphi. This is a Stefan Feld game, I believe, and I have not played it. This list is great because there's quite a few games on this list that I have not played, so I have made a list. This is definitely on it. Oracle of Delphi looks very interesting.
That is going to do it. Thank you so much, Black Tank, Michael Walker of So Very Wrong About Games. That was a fantastic peanut gallery segment where we talked, you talked back, and then we talked back to you talking back, and you didn't say so thank you for that, Michael Walker. You should listen to So Very Wrong About Games. It is a fantastic board game podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to our 30th through 21st favorite board games of all time. You can talk to us about these picks at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. You can talk to us on Facebook. You can talk to us on our Board Game Geek Guild. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com.
And just one last thing before we go. Some of the wonderful, wonderful folks on our Discord are about to kick off the latest incarnation of The Contest. The Contest is something they ran last year. They're going to be running again this year. And the idea is it is a group of contestants, a group of listeners who vow not to buy any games all year, only trade for them. So they are folks after my own heart, obviously. So if you're interested in signing up for that, it is a great, really fun event where they sort of encourage each other and make fun of each other and tempt each other to buy games when, hot Kickstarters come out, trying to be the last one to survive. You can go to our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord and go to the contest channel where you can sign up right now. Absolutely no cost to join. And if you were looking for a reason to curb your board game acquisitions, at least in terms of games for cash, then it might be something you want to check out.
Thank you so much to Heart Society for their song What's on Your Mind, Kid from their album Wake the Queens. You can support us on Patreon at boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon. Thank you so much to our patrons who support the show. We could not do it without you. Thank you all and good night.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Peace.
My 25th favorite board game of
26th.
my 26th. Hope. Not even halfway done tonight.
The other thing that I love about Lancaster. Hold on one second. Chloe. Just chewing on a plastic water bottle.
Oh no.
Sorry?
No, I just said oh no.
139 for life. Walker out.